Good morning to all of you, and delighted to be speaking on this very, very vital part of one's economic affairs. When we talk about financial planning, just one second. How long do I speak? How long do I speak? 15 minutes? 20 minutes? 30 minutes, okay. And leave some time for question answers? Okay. So when we talk about a very vital topic like preparing for the future, a lot of homilies and home truths and many cliches are obvious to be included. Simply because these are sensible truths and easy to understand truths should not mean that they are unimportant. And therefore, I very strongly believe not only guarding one's wealth, building it and nurturing it to the higher heights is a sacred duty of everyone. Even for your own money, you are a trustee and you do not have any untempered or untrammeled liberty to do whatever you want to do with your money. The money that is there with you and to be built must be treated with the same care and with the same concern as if you are managing money of somebody else. And therefore the trusteeship responsibility for one's own money is a very vital idea, though it doesn't easily come to the people. Let me talk of some of the home truths before I come to little bit more central part of the financial planning or wealth building, and what are the key critical components which help in building long-term wealth. And many speakers before I came and very correctly mentioned that you need to plan as early as you can. Unfortunately, our academics do not teach financial matters. I think whether you are a nuclear scientist or whether you are a physicist or you are a physician or you are a company executive, it is very, very vital for one to learn the basic nuances of finance. You may not have the technical capability around the finance, which you may or may not be inclined for. And globally, if you see, it's a specialized activity, and relatively very few are involved in the large matter of finance. But a basic exposure to finance and some of the important concepts is certainly preparing a kind of a basic tuition for the people. Like you learn language skills and like you get exposed to science and geography and history during your schooling. Unfortunately, financial lessons, basic exposure to finance, which should be compulsory part of the secondary schooling, but unfortunately is not. If that were to be the case, probably need to tell anybody to plan early may not have arisen, but it does simply because we do not. And this is not the case merely in India. All over the world, finance is not taught is a part of your schooling, which I believe basic concepts should, and it should be compulsory subject, and it should not be an optional one. That would have meant a lot of expensive mistakes, careless negligence, and avoidable kind of faux pas would have been taken care of en masse for a large number of people. But be it as it may, plan early. Wealth has great correlation with the time. Of course, it is great correlation with the productivity of what you do with the wealth. But productivity of the wealth or the outcome that you generate on a given amount of corpus or the corpus that you keep building over time is a very vital element, but the time that you provide for that process to work is a very vital part. Therefore, starting early can hardly be overemphasized. As I mentioned, it may sound like a cliche, it may sound like a very fundamental home truth, but it's a very vital truth. Second, like for any specialized thing, you take help of people who are better equipped for that. Finance is even more so. This is not a sales statement I'm making that people need to take help of the professionals so that those professionals earn the fees. But please consider the largest industry in the world, the investment industry, which roughly manages $340 trillion of wealth, money in the world, but is actually managed by less than 1 million people. Nowhere in the world such a large industry is getting managed by so few number of people. For comparison, somebody like TCS, IT software services firm, would have an employment, TCS and Infosys would have employment number larger than the entire employment number for the global finance and the investment industry. That just tells you it's a highly specialized one. It's not a general one. For buying a fixed deposit of a bank, probably you don't need advice. But for managing wealth, for investment, certainly you do need an advice. And unless and until you yourselves have the strength and the capability and a real confidence that you can do it and do it well, this is not a DIY, do-it-yourself kind of an industry. Investing is not for entertainment. For that, probably you should go to the movie theaters. It is not a hobby. Gardening may be a good substitute for that. It's not for gambling. For that, casinos are better advised places. And it is not for excitement, for which you go to the theme parks, Investing is a serious activity, and it requires serious understanding. Excuse me, I think there is constant dialogue. It just disturbs while I'm talking. Sorry, I forgot what I was talking. Yeah, it's a serious activity. Thank you. It's a serious activity which you need to do with a full commitment and clarity. It's not DIY. Unless and until you have a good answer that you can do it, and not only do it, you have inclination, willingness, and ability and time to spare to do a good job. It's not something that you just do it for entertainment, for occupation of time, for excitement, or for any some such reason. Vaidyanathan talked about respecting money, and it is very vital. Respecting money is a very, very critical idea. If you do not respect money, money will not respect you back. And even if it is your own money, the same rule applies. In fact, even more so, because there you may suffer from a false sense of entitlement that you can do what you want to do. Fourthly, when we talk about wealth, and here I don't want to sound philosophical, but in a more real sense, wealth is not merely money. Wealth is not merely rupee and dollars that you can count. And I do not mean it in a light-hearted way. I do not intend to talk about it in a purely metaphysical, philosophical terms. But the real wealth you build is a unison of mind, body, and heart. The intellectual prowess, which allows you to do a good job of it, a good body which will support that wealth building process for a long period of time, and the wealth of the emotions and the relationships genuinely that you build allow your body also to remain long and strong for you to do what you have to do. Therefore, wealth, even though it may be fashionable to talk about only in monetary terms, non-monetary aspects of the wealth are equally vital. And why am I saying this? Because good habits need a mindset to compound. Much like wealth needs time and a right kind of productivity to compound, good habits compound. If you don't take care of your teeth and don't brush daily 2 times, you can't make up for it by brushing 14 times on the 7th day. If you need an exercise, you need an exercise. You can't make up for it in a month by overdoing it on a particular day. Habits compound, wealth compounds, and unless and until you nurture the right habits which will nurture your heart as well as your body, along with the mind which will let you compound the wealth, unless you wealth in the totality, in unison, you get a very incomplete perspective of the entire exercise. Why build wealth? Building wealth is not for its own sake, not merely to nurture your ego, or because it sounds good and it gives you some false but probable bragging rights. You build wealth because it liberates you. It liberates you from the tyranny of doing what you do merely because you are compelled to do, rather than because you love to do it. Wealth allows your passion to be ignited, to liberate you from the crippling choices that you are bound to, but you need not be bound to. And therefore, building wealth requires that understanding that it can possibly, not just 40 after 40, but even earlier, can liberate you to the choices that you may or may not have possibility of considering. And therefore, once again I would say, building wealth, optimizing wealth is not merely a choice, is not merely an optionality. It is a sacred duty of everyone to optimize and to keep doing it time after time for one's own wealth with a detached perspective of a bystander, as if it's a duty that you discharge as a trustee of that money. When everybody optimizes the wealth of himself or herself, you are optimizing the wealth of the country, of the society. And when you optimize the wealth of the society and the economy, you do a favor to yourself because it lets you compound your own thing better. And therefore, this may sound like a gooey kind of an idea, but managing one's wealth, one has to view it from a detached bystander, but with an ubrima fide kind of responsibility of a trustee. Ubrima fide is a Latin word. What it means is something of utmost faith. Managing wealth is a contract of utmost faith. Whether you do it for others, obviously so, but when you do it for yourself, you don't account to anybody, but it is even more so. It's a contract of utmost faith. And all the care and all the attention that you can shower is never too high. Coming to where we stand in these wealth choices, I believe we as a country are at a cusp of one of the greatest phases of economic expansion you can ever likely to see. Not only this country will grow at a rate which is unprecedented compared to her own history, but the country will grow at a rate which will be in excess of any comparable, meaningful example anywhere in the world for a length of time. While rate of growth is what it is and what it does for building wealth, but there are three important other elements which are usually not taken into account for the task of the building wealth. The first one is certainty or uncertainty. When the growth becomes more certain, it reduces, by definition, the uncertainty, therefore the risk, and because it reduces the risk of the future, the present value of that becomes higher. And therefore, anything which is relatively more certain is less risky, and because it is perceived to be less risky, it is more valuable today. I would like to submit, through the variety of reforms and many galvanizing changes we have gathered in our society and economy over the last 9-10 years, really speaking, we are building an ecosystem of its own. Reforms disparate and few and far between do not add up to much. At most, arithmetic sum total of whatever it may do. But when reforms are many, they are deep and they are interconnected and they keep occurring time to time. They build an ecosystem of its own. And therefore it is no longer an arithmetic additive force, but it becomes a force multiplier. In my opinion, we are at a cusp of that stage where reforms will galvanize and allow the economy to catapult as a force multiplier rather than arithmetic incrementality. The third is durability. If the growth is high, but for a short period, it only does a limited amount of thing. When the growth is for a long period, but of a very small percentage, again, mediocrity is the outcome, but not a great outcome. For great consequences to be built, you need superior growth, but you need the growth which is durable for a long period of time. Again, the economy, policy decision framework, many other enabling things that have happened like Aadhaar, affirmation of the bank accounts becoming digital financial pathways, technology adoption, manufacturing trust, the infrastructure, the logistics, and the transparency of direct and indirect taxes. Many of these are building towards durability of the growth. And therefore, third very important element, apart from the rate of growth, predictability, the durability also kicks in. And finally, the quality of growth. Quality may not be a tangible thing, but a very real part of the value creation, of the wealth building. It may reflect in form of superior capital efficiency, return on capital employed, return on equity. It may reflect in form of moats in a business, which allows it to fight against vicissitudes and challenges of the business environment. It builds for many other qualitative norms which allow, apart from growth to convert into matching value, the additional quotient that you get as a value creation actually comes from the quality. It is a lubricating path which ensures that the outcome of growth into value creation is not just one for one or less than one, but more than one. And that more than additionality comes from the quality of the growth. I would like to say India today is poised for a long-term growth, a growth which is more predictable, growth which is more durable, and qualitatively one of the best qualitative soundness of that growth. One example I'll give, return on equity, one of the benchmark numbers for value creation in businesses, for the first time in India, has exceeded that of America. The last year, the average return on equity of the corporate sector in India has overtaken that of America. And America has been that vanguard place for capitalism for a length of time. Slowly, unfortunately, things are crumbling there. But one of the most important pillars for American capitalism has been superior return on equity. And for the first time, Indian return on equity has overtaken that of America. And that is something very important message to say for the future value creation. Therefore, I believe the kind of a growth and the quality of the growth and its durability and predictability will convert into the top line and the cash flows and the profits of the businesses, in turn into their value creation, in turn into the wealth of the owners of those businesses, and eventually it will reflect into the portfolios of investors who are disciplined, who are long-term, who are wise, and who are restrained. I almost get goosebumps when I think about the future ahead. I'm into investing now for 35 years. And investing, one of the things it teaches you is cynicism and skepticism, which is a useful tool to protect your skin in investments. Therefore, 35 years is long enough for me to be a die-hard cynic. But on the contrary, I have a childlike optimism about where things are. 5 years back, I wrote an article in Economic Times called The Golden Decade of India. The feedback I got from well-meaning people was that it was a bit presumptuous or a bit too early and rather hazy. Today, if I have to write the same article, only a little thing will change. The title, instead of Golden Decade, will convert into Golden Decades of India. Singular to plural is the only change really, I think. And therefore, I believe not just next 5 years or 10 years, but 15 or 20 years or more, will be one of the breathtaking phase of value creation, wealth building, business value expansion of an unprecedented variety. And if soothsaying and forecasting is a dangerous activity, I am fully aware of that. But if I have to stick my neck out and say, for the coming decades, Indian stock markets will be number one stock market in the world compared to any other market, and I'm talking in dollar term returns. And not only it will be number one market for coming decades, but it will be by a margin. And therefore, do not miss this particular opportunity of a phenomenal variety. Like Shakespeare said, there comes a time when in affairs of men, taken at the tide, it leads to fortunes. I think we are standing at that vintage moment of that favorable tide, when taken it to the logical conclusion, will lead to the wealth which is unprecedented. The two classical components of the wealth. The fixed income and the equities. Nobody in the world has gotten rich with fixed income investing. Net of inflation, net of any accompanying cost, and net of taxation, the best thing fixed income investment can do is at best to protect the final real wealth. And more often than not, it may actually be negative wealth. Therefore, it's a reducing or retarding treadmill kind of a situation. Though, on a nominal basis, it gives an illusion that something keeps growing every year or every period. But some amount of fixed income in the wealth allocation is necessary for known needs, for a certain mitigation of the contingencies, some amount of cover for your expenses, and some amount which gives you a bit of a comfort that you can withdraw, a peace of mind when need be. But putting anything more than that into the fixed income, each one has to figure out in the schema of the things where one's wealth is lying and where one wants to be, and therefore how much you need for that into the fixed income and based on the objectives. But the mechanical allocation plans where a given percentage of the wealth is into fixed income and this and that, unfortunately, is one of the bad financial mistruths which is being sold very, very easily and commonly. Fixed income amount probably needs to be absolute, and if your wealth grows, percentage of it automatically will decline. You don't have to keep raising the percentage with the increase in the wealth, keeping the same percentage in fixed income will keep making you over-allocate to fixed income than you need be. Equities, again, some very bad ideas proliferate. One of the bad ideas is the age advances, equity allocation should reduce. And the classic formula is 100 minus your age. And as you grow older, you should put less into the equity. Nothing is fundamentally more terrible advice on finance and wealth building than that. The second bad advice, which unfortunately in management schools also is propagated, from where I have studied in IIM, also such half-truths are circulated, higher the risk, higher the return. In equity investing, nothing is farther from the truth. It's only low and meaningful and calibrated risk only has a chance of really creating higher outcome and more profitable outcome. Blind and foolish risk-taking is not a recipe for building wealth. It's a recipe for excitement which can get deflated very badly when things are against you. Therefore, finally, I'll end with the power of the compounding. 1 rupee, 14.75%, 14.78% per annum. 1 rupee in 50 years becomes about 1,000. But in 100 years, it becomes about 10 lakhs. And in 150 years, the same modest amount becomes 100 crores. 1 rupee, 150 years, 14.8% compounding. And in 200 years, rupee becomes equal to 1 trillion rupees. Do not underestimate the power of compounding, what it can do. When you spend less, grow your income more, and save and invest more, you allow the power of compounding to work for a longer period of time. Money wasted is money lost forever, and that's where the role of discipline comes about. Money saved or conserved is an income earned, which gives a power to put it into the compounding process. And therefore, the true power of the investment is the power of compounding. Power of compounding is a power to enjoy for a long period of time a reasonable outcome in a particular period. Compounding of habits also is a similar thing. You do something which is normal and not extraordinary, but time after time after time for a prolonged period with a great degree of discipline and panache and intensity, the outcome at the end becomes extraordinarily large compared to what each individual period outcome is. That is the opportunity that everybody has. You may or may not have an opportunity to manage your wealth yourself. But if you understand the principles of how to build wealth and what to do, and then take the right help to make it happen, I believe that sacred duty that you have for optimizing and growing your wealth is something that can be attained. And as I mentioned, the whole process is to liberate yourself, to give you a space, to give you choices in the life, to pursue your passions, and therefore you optimize the outcome for the society. Thank you.